you so much for joining, everyone. I'm Eda, I'm the head of programs and impact at the Fore, and I'm excited to tell you all about our summer 2026 funding round. So this is the info session, here to talk through how to apply, what the process is like, and there'll be space at the end for any questions. Let me know if you can't see the screen or if you're having any issues. Please feel free to put your hand up, unmute, or chuck something in the chat. I will be trying to manage lots of different things at once, so please excuse me if I don't see your chat straight away, but I will try my best to keep my eye on the chat box. All right, just to go through the agenda. I'll kind of give a recap about the Fore and what we offer. We'll talk through the eligibility criteria for the summer round, what we're looking to fund. We'll give an overview of the application process, what you need to submit when applying, top tips for writing a strong application, and then key dates. So I'm sure you're already somewhat familiar with us, but just to recap on the Fore, we are the UK's only venture philanthropy fund, and our goal is to back small charities and social enterprises. We give unrestricted grant funding of up to £45,000, and this can be spread across 1 to 3 years. Apologies if you can hear some drilling in the background, there's some work going on. It's up to you how you want to receive this funding. So that can be £45,000 in one go, or it could be 15K each year. We also provide wraparound support, so we plug you into networks, giving you access to skills, training, and peer support, and we also offer impact measurement support. Applicants set their own targets for the grant term with support from our strategic applicant consultants, which we'll talk a bit more about in a bit. But these SACs, strategic applicant consultants, will provide strategic advice to ensure targets are ambitious and measurable. And there are no long application forms. We try, because we understand complex forms are incredibly time consuming and your time is very precious. So we try to keep it simple and easy. We do make sure there are no long monitoring forms. So we know a lot of funders ask for written reports as part of their monitoring and evaluation, but the Fore aims to take this burden away from you. So our M&E involves a 1-hour Zoom call at yearly intervals, and then we write up the notes. There is a short survey that collects quantitative data, but that's relatively quick and easy as well. But we try to really minimize the amount of writing you provide for us. Lastly, we guarantee feedback for every applicant. So whether your feedback is written or verbal, that depends on how far your application progresses. And I'll go into that in a second as well. But first, a bit about our impact. So since 2017, we've supported over 650 charities across the UK and awarded £12.5 million in grant funding. We've given over 29,000 hours of skills support and matched over 450 volunteers. And we're proud that our process breaks down many of the barriers to funding that charities often face. So for example, 15% of our charities are global majority led. Here is our eligibility criteria. So to be eligible to apply for the Fore, the organization must be one of the following, either a registered charity, a community interest company limited by guarantee. We don't fund any CICs limited by shares. Or it can be a charitable community benefit society or a non-charitable community benefit society with an asset lock. Your annual income must also be under £500,000 in your previous financial year. So that would be a previous submitted year, or published accounts for those that are applicable. If you haven't submitted any accounts, then it's just your last financial year. Your charity can operate in any location or sector, but you must be registered in the UK. Our funding is probably different from other grants you may have applied for in the past. So we don't fund project-based work or business as usual. We're focused on strengthening your organization, not the cause or the impact on beneficiaries, but the organization. To try and break this down, the applications are assessed according to two key criteria. So the first one is strength of leadership, and the second one is transformational impact. And that's a transformational impact that the grant would have on your whole organization. And I'll go into detail on both shortly, but generally, applicants who are strong in both areas are those who are more likely to receive funding. In terms of transformational impact, so this again means organizational development. So it's not beneficiary need. There probably will be an impact on beneficiaries, but that should be a byproduct of the organizational transformation, not the transformation itself. What transformation looks like in practice will vary depending on the type of organization. But here are some examples of what it can look like. So we have scale. So that refers to providing the resources and infrastructure needed to allow the organization to grow. For example, by employing staff that frees up capacity. We have sustainability. That refers to placing the organization in a strong position to face expected and unexpected challenges. There's also structure, which refers to structural changes that will strengthen the organization. For example, moving from being volunteer-led to being run by employees. And finally, efficiency, and that refers to making systems more efficient. For example, increasing admin support, updating technical equipment, or implementing a client relationship management system. The request for funding doesn't need to cover all 4 areas. Consider this as a guidance for what transformational impact could look like and how you might want to frame it. Most importantly, we want the impact of the funding to be sustained even after the funding ends. So essentially, we don't want charities to kind of go back to square one once that funding has finished. So what this means is the Fore is the right fund of you if you're ready to embrace the step change and genuine transformation for your organization. Cool. Here is the process. So it starts with registering your interest in applying to our funding round. That's very quick, very short. And then we'll do a random allocation to invite a proportion to apply. And the number of people we invite to apply really depends on how many grants we can give out, because we want to make sure that we can provide feedback to everyone that applies. So if you're invited to apply, you'll need to write and submit your application by the deadline. So then at stage 1, your applications will be reviewed by one of our strategic applicant consultants. And these consultants are people who we've vetted, trained, they have very varied backgrounds, but a lot of the time in nonprofit and the charity sector, and they're really there to support you in developing your proposal once they've shortlisted you. So these SACs will review the applications. In stage 2, shortlisted applicants are invited to have an ideas testing conversation. And this is a chance to discuss your funding request in more detail. And our SACs are there to support you and help refine your funding ask and develop targets for the grant term. And there you can see them as kind of critical friends, helping you see challenges clearly and facilitate problem solving. They also provide a space for you to think about the long term and talk about your strategic support needs. At stage 3, our SACs will bring the strongest applicants to our funding panels, for which the SACs will write a final report presenting your case for funding, and they'll attend the panel on your behalf to answer questions from panelists. At stage 4, successful applicants can access our funding and wraparound support. So let's go into what registering and applying involves in a bit more detail. As mentioned, the first step is to register your interest in applying to our funding round. For each of our funding rounds, registration will be open for exactly 1 week. During this window, the link to register will appear on our website. Registration involves filling in a very simple form, like I mentioned. It's got basic details about your organization. It'll take around 2 to 3 minutes to complete. And once registration closes, you'll receive an email to confirm whether or not you've been allocated a place on the funding round. Details of how to apply will be included. If we receive more registrations than we have places available on the funding round, then places will be allocated at random. And like I said, the number of places available is determined by the amount of funding we have available to distribute. We normally are oversubscribed, as you can imagine. And that's why registration only takes 2 to 3 minutes of your time. So what we do advise you is that you don't start putting together an application until you have received an email confirming your place on the funding round. Um, Applicants who've been allocated a place on the funding round are then given around 4 weeks to prepare and submit their application. Before we move on to the application itself, here's the information we ask for during registration. As you can see, it's designed to be straightforward and take as little time as possible. So stuff that you will know off the top of your head. Your application document. So your application document is your pitch, essentially, for an interview with one of our SACs. It's your chance to make your case for support, and we're not looking for perfect language or design work in applications assessed only on content. It should be no longer than 3 A4 pages, including the financial table, which I'll show you in a second, and that can be in Word or PDF format. We have no strict application form. All we ask is that you don't excess the 3 page limit and use the following sections, which will also be in the email and also on our website for you to refer back to. And that includes tell us about your organization. So we want to know about what you do, why it's important, how you're having an impact. Tell us about who leads your organization. So tell us about the skills and experience of your senior management, directors, and trustees. Tell us how much funding you're requesting and over how many years. Tell us how our funding will have a transformational impact on your whole organization. And that's where we really want to hear about the different types of transformation I mentioned earlier. So are you thinking scale, sustainability, efficiency, structure, and explain to us how the funding would unlock it. And if there is a byproduct on beneficiaries, include that, but remember to really focus on the transformation of the organization and describe your vision for how the charity will be once you've spent your grant. And then the final section, not the final section, the penultimate section, set a few simple targets for the grant period. This will essentially outline the steps you'll take to achieve the transformation for your organization. And then it's the financial table, which I'll show you on the next slide. But before I do that, you'll also need to share a set of audited accounts if available. If they're not available, then the latest set of management accounts or the latest financial report also works. That's going through. These have a transformational impact. This is just going more into depth into each section. So in the issue, some questions to prompt you are, what issue is your organization addressing? So for example, are you helping people in debt sort out their finances or providing mental health services to children? Another question to prompt you, what work do you do? We need to understand what your activities are. Are they workshops? Are they tutoring? Are they theatre shows? We also need to understand why your work is so important. How are you having an impact? And then who leads your organization and why you're the right people to do this. And again, how much money you're asking for. So for example, it would say £45,000 over 3 years, 15,000 each year, or £45,000 in 1 year. In terms of the transformational impact, like I mentioned, whether it's scale, sustainability, structure, or efficiency, but also don't forget how will the impact of the grant be sustained beyond the grant period. There's no detailed budget breakdown required. We don't need kind of a spreadsheet or a table, but definitely outline your ideas of how you want to spend the money, because that just helps tell the story of what the steps will be to get to that transformational impact. And then in terms of setting targets for the grant period, link it to what you're trying to achieve in the funding request and demonstrate that our grant will help you achieve your organization goals. And here's the financial table. In your financial table, you should have 3 years of historic financial information, but please don't worry if your organization is new and doesn't have this yet. That's also fine. We have applications every round that have just started. But we do ask for 3 years of forecast financial information and ask you to fill in those columns, assuming you receive the full grant. So the purpose of this is to show the difference the funding would make to your organization. In this table, we ask for information about each year relating to unrestricted income, restricted income, and when you would receive the FORS grant. We also ask for information about your wages and salaries and all other expenditures. And underneath the table, we'll ask you to note your current level of unrestricted and restricted reserves. To help you fill in this table, we provide a template as an Excel spreadsheet on our website. We also don't expect this to be perfect, but we ask that you try to complete this table as it really helps our SACs understand your organization's finances and the impact of the FORS grant a lot better. It can be really difficult to assess the potential for transformation without this table, so including this will really strengthen your application. And all of this comes together to help tell the story. So one thing that's helpful is just making sure that all of the parts of the application connect together and reinforce the same narrative. So to help, here are a couple of case studies of charities we have previously funded to show you what transformational impact has looked like in practice. So we've got this example of Sal's Shoes. Sal's Shoes provides pre-loved shoes to children in need in the UK and worldwide. From a small seed in 2013, grew a mighty oak, with Sal's having distributed 2.5 million pairs of shoes by 2021. While Sal's had successfully kept pace with growing demand, the volunteer-led organisation knew it needed greater capacity to continue to grow and develop. Support from the Fore allowed the founder, CJ Bowery, then operating in a volunteer capacity, to leave her existing job in 2021 and devote herself full-time as CEO. This provided the capacity to diversify Sal's income base, for example, from funding from trusts and foundations and untapped corporate donations. It also provided much needed time for business planning and improved financial forecasting. So now that we've seen what a fundable proposal looks like, here are some top tips to help you write a strong application, just to kind of recap everything. And I would say this is perhaps the most important page. And really, really hammer in some of the common pitfalls that exclude applications quite quickly. So please make sure your application doesn't exceed the 3-page limit, and that includes a financial summary table. We won't be able to consider your application any further if it does exceed that, otherwise it's unfair. Please make sure you answer all the questions. What I would recommend is before you submit your application, just go back to the website and kind of tick off all the things we ask for, like a checklist. It's really easy to just kind of miss off one bit. Don't forget to really focus on the strength of leadership and transformational impact on the organization of the beneficiaries. So avoid any business as usual funding requests or anything that's focused on beneficiaries. The requests that focus just on beneficiaries or would only allow you to continue existing services are seen as less compelling from the FORS perspective. Clearly explain how our grant would have a transformational impact in terms of your organization's scale, sustainability, structure, or efficiency, and explain how this will be sustained beyond the grant period. For example, if you're requesting funding for a new staff role, you need to explain how this will be sustained after the grant has ended. And then make sure your targets relate to what you want to use the funding for, making sure they are ambitious but realistic. So there are 2 upcoming funding rounds in summer 2026. We have the national funding round and the Northwest funding round, which I imagine most of you are here for. So our Northwest funding round is only for organizations based in the Northwest of England. If your organization is not based there, then please register for our national funding round, but you can only register for one funding round, and if you submit multiple, we'll only accept one in the interest of fairness. So key dates to keep in mind is that registration will open from next week, I believe, Wednesday 25th at midday, and go on till the following Wednesday, 1st of April. And then we'll confirm your place on the funding round and invite you to apply if you've been successful on the 2nd of April, so the day after the registration ends. And then application deadline is the 27th of April. And then we announce funding decisions in July. Lots of information there. And we will be sharing the slides and the slides with everyone, so don't worry too much. But let me know if there's anything you want me to go back to, but also I will open it up to questions. Feel free to put your hand up or unmute, but I'm just looking through the chat now. Hello, how strict is the annual income under £500,000? Would you accept a 3-year average? This last year we were a couple of thousand over. Yeah, unfortunately, the way we define it is that the last published accounts is under £500,000. So even if it's been over, but then it goes under the last year, we would accept it, but not the other way around. Is there guidance on how much an organization can bid for in relation to the annual income? What is the ratio of submitted applications to those who are successful? So to answer the first one, and then I'll go out to some other, I think there were a couple of hands up there. Is there a guidance on how much an organization can bid for in relation to the annual income? Nothing strict, nothing formal, but I would say that if you're applying for something that seems outside of what the norm is, so kind of much higher than your normal absorption rate or much lower than what might look to have an impact, is just to be really clear about that in the narrative of why it's how you can absorb that amount, and what plans you have in place to kind of mitigate it. And then vice versa, why, if you're a bigger on this larger end, but applying for kind of smaller tranches, is just explaining the reasoning behind that as well. So not formally, but definitely acknowledging it and then kind of reasoning it is very helpful. The ratio of submitted applications to those who are successful, it really varies depending on how many applications we get and how many grants we can give out. Sarah, got your hand up, I think.
Yeah, hi. Hi. My question is, if we're a national organisation, but we have 3 bases, Manchester, Birmingham, London, would we, and we wanted to, so the structural changes would be national, but also in one of the bases in Manchester, would you still recommend the application to be the national one?
It's a good question. Yes, I would, because if and sorry, did you say that the transformation and the funding would impact the organization on a national level?
It would affect it at a national level, and that would trickle down to the 3 bases. But yes.
Yeah, then national round, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries. Pamela.
Hi, yes, good morning, thank you. My question is, if we are a London-based charity, do we then apply for the national funding round?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
That would be the national.
So the other one is for the northwest of England?
Yes, exactly.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries. I'll continue on the chat questions, but again, feel free to unmute or put your hand up. So is the total grant 45K or 30K? Slides seem to say 30K. Yep, sorry, that's a mistake. We'll double check that on the slides, but the maximum grant is 45K. It's up to 45K, so you don't have to apply for that. Is there a restriction on how much running costs and capital funding we can request? For example, 50% salaries and 50% on anything else? No, there's no restriction, and actually a lot of applications we get are pretty, can be entirely on salaries or entirely on capital. It's really just about what you need and the transformation and telling that story. Does the national or Northwest funding rounds have different dates, or will it just be a separate link on your website? Same dates, but separate link. But don't worry, we do kind of do a little bit of consolidation in the background if you apply to the wrong one, but it just helps us if you apply in the right link. Do you have staff available to guide with the bid writing? We don't, unfortunately, due to capacity, but also kind of fairness in the process. But if we get more questions like that, we can definitely look into if we can partner with someone or an organization. Are CICs eligible? CICs are eligible if they are limited by guarantee. We can't support those that are limited by shares. Will you apply the random selection approach if you were oversubscribed again? We were randomly not selected twice already. Yes, we will. That is our process, but we are kind of digging into data and collecting feedback. For those of you who may have applied previously and been unsuccessful, then you should have received a form to collect some data. So please do fill that out because that really helps us improve and review our processes. But yes, currently that's still the process. But one thing we are looking at is if you haven't been successful in the random allocation for a certain number of times consecutively, then we'll kind of try to pull you through a bit more or look to change the algorithm so it's a little bit fairer. But currently that's still the process, but it's something we're looking into. Is it capital funding or revenue that is available or both? I think we answered that. Will you consider a leadership team that is 50-year-olds retired people? Of course, I think sounds like there's a lot of skills and experience in there. Yeah, definitely. If our unrestricted reserves are over £45,000, does that matter? If they're over 45,000, I mean, that's more a question around the proportion, not the total value. So what is the proportion of your unrestricted reserves to your running costs? We do really try to encourage best practice. So we try to encourage between 3 to 6 months reserves. Obviously, it's a little bit different between CICs and charities. But what I will say is that those who have little reserves, it's often fine because we understand as long as you acknowledge that in the application and say that part of the transformation. I wouldn't say I wouldn't say it's a strong application to say that your main purpose for the funding is to build reserves, but I would acknowledge that as part of the transformation. If you feel like the reserves are a little bit higher than what they should be, again, just acknowledging it and kind of giving any context around it, but we don't want to punish people for having healthy reserves. Let me know if I've missed any questions in the chat or any other questions in the room. John, I see some fingers. I'm not sure if it's a finger or a hand. I'm assuming you're looking for the unmute. Yes.
Unmute,
Yes.
yes.
Hurrah.
Can you just explain what you mean by business as usual funding?
Yeah, so business as usual, what's an example? If you are looking to, say you run workshops and you're looking to hire a workshop facilitator to continue running those workshops, or even if you're looking to expand those workshops, but it's not necessarily, and it is a bit nuanced, it's not necessarily in a strategic way, it's just kind of, we want to run 2 more workshops a month. And then where it would be different is saying that for example, having a workshop facilitator would open up leadership capacity. So that would feel different because then you're able to leverage that additional capacity to think more strategically about fundraising or income revenue or partnerships. Or if you're thinking about expansion, but again, a bit more strategically or on a bigger scale. So actually this workshop per edition would think about how to standardize some of the materials so that you could then spread to multiple regions across the country. So there's kind of that difference between running business as usual, and even if it's a slight growth versus really strategic, unlocking something more strategic.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. Will you share the slides? Yes, we'll share the slides. Any other questions? And if people have, because it is something that can be it's all quite abstract. So if you have other hypotheticals or questions you want to pose, we can talk those through. Because I think that does help just ground it a little bit. But any other questions? Paddy. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, my organisation is a very small youth centre in Liverpool, and part of the issues is trying to develop the trustee group as an effective governing body, and so in that sense, we're a very, very weak position.
Mm.
So basically, I'm just basically saying if we're at such a weak basic level, and what you want to use the funds for is actually to improve the trusteeship of the centre and the governance of the centre over a period of years to enable us to be more effective at fundraising and managing the building and everything else. Would we possibly be eligible? It sounds to me like that we're at a bit of a low level to be going for this sort of funding.
You're definitely eligible. In terms of kind of the framing, I would say when it comes to applications around governance, I would say the common pitfalls are that they forget to address the sustainability part. So sometimes there's this plan to kind of spend the funds to strengthen governance, but then not acknowledging that there are probably kind of ongoing costs. And so part of what you're unlocking with the new board or the new leadership is some new skills around how to diversify your income stream or how to access and new opportunities that can help you not only go strength from strength, but also continue that diverse governance. So it's possible, but I think it is a little bit more of a complicated story to tell because it's kind of that governance needs to lead to something that feels a bit more tangible and sustainable.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Is this fund open to faith-based charities and associated activities? It is the only, well, it depends. The restriction is that the activities have to be open to everyone, so they can't be exclusive. So you can't only be able to support, for example, Christians or Muslims. It has to be open to the whole public. Any other questions? Sarah?
So, if your events are open, but they're majority used by just one faith group, but across many multicultural faith group, but that's mainly who it would attract, but it is open, there's no closed remit, would that count?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, as the part of our due diligence is really just kind of looking at your like website or social media to see the language, and if it says it's only for certain people of faith, then that's what would exclude you. But if the language is open, then that's fine. It doesn't really matter who ends up taking out.
Yeah, so the language is about increasing leadership capacity of young British Muslims.
Say that again, sorry.
Increasing the leadership capacity of the young British Muslim community.
Of the young British Muslim community.
But our events are open, and we do have Jewish young people who attend some of our events.
Yeah, then I think that's fine, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, oh, one more. Jim?
Yeah, as you were speaking, it just occurred to me, in terms of sustainability and something that's transformative, one of the things that would be useful for our charity is we want to shift our funding base because we've relied on lots of grant funding in the past. And I would quite like to see our director spend a lot of time pushing us towards more donations and fundraising based activities because I think there's a lot of mileage in that we've never really tapped because we've not had the time. Is that the sort of innovative focus that could lead to sustainability that you think would have interest for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think looking into different ways to fund yourselves is a really common one. What I would say though is typically because it is competitive, it's helpful to be to provide as much detail as possible on that, even if it's just I've talked to some people and the demand is this. Whereas I think applications that tend to be less successful are just quite vague and just talk about having ideas. So
Yeah.
any specific details or insights or research or leads is always really helpful.
All right, thank you. That's helpful.
All right. Well, I'll wrap up then, let you all go. But if you do have any more questions, feel free to email them to info@the thefore.org, and we will share these slides. And yes, look out for the registration opening next week. But otherwise, good luck. Thank you for your time. And yes, best of luck and have a great day. Thanks, everyone.